Officer Brody Keller saw the grey hair, the trembling hands, and the cane, and he assumed he had found a victim, not an opponent. A cruel satisfaction spread across his face as he snapped the handcuffs onto her arthritic wrists, mocking the 74-year-old woman's desperate pleas for dignity. But he had misread the situation entirely. That trembling was not fear, it was rage. And the contact she dialed on her shattered phone screen, a name simply listed as Knox, was not a worried neighbour or a public defender. He was Major Knox Whitaker, a Tier 1 Delta Force operator on leave, and he was only minutes away. What happened next was not merely a rescue. It was a systematic dismantling of corruption that would bring the entire city to its knees. This is the story of how one arrogant badge picked a fight with the wrong mother. The hydrangeas were thirsty. That was the only thought on Etta Mae Whitaker's mind as she stepped off her porch, the wooden steps groaning softly under her weight. At 74, Etta moved with a deliberate, rhythmic slowness, every motion shaped by the ache in her joints. The humidity in the North Carolina air hung thick and heavy, hinting at a storm to come later that afternoon. But for now, the morning sun glowed golden and deceptively gentle. She adjusted her straw hat with its frayed blue ribbon, the same one she had worn since her husband Earl passed away years ago. Oak Creek had changed since then. The small, modest brick bungalows that once sheltered factory workers and school teachers were gradually being torn down and replaced by sleek modern houses of glass and grey siding. The faces in the neighbourhood were changing too. There were fewer people sitting on porches, fewer friendly waves from across the street. But Etta stayed. She was a fixture here, as deeply rooted as the ancient oak tree that shaded her driveway. Etta reached for the garden hose, her knuckles swollen and knotted from years of work. She hummed a low gospel tune, "Precious Lord, take my hand," as the water sputtered and then flowed clear and steady. She watered the roots carefully, avoiding the leaves, just as her father had taught her long ago. The silence of the street was suddenly broken by the low, guttural growl of an engine. Etta did not look up right away. Cars often sped down Elm Street, but this growl slowed, settling into the distinct idle of a police cruiser. The tires crunched over gravel as the vehicle pulled part way into her driveway, blocking the path to the mailbox. Etta straightened up, wiping her hands on her floral apron. She squinted against the sun. It was a black and white SUV bearing the emblem of the city police department. Two doors opened. From the driver's side stepped Officer Brody Keller. He was a man whose weight settled in his chest and shoulders, a once muscular build now softening into something heavier and more aggressive. He wore his sunglasses perched on the back of his shaved head, and his thumbs were already hooked into his tactical vest. He looked like a man who was bored and spoiling for a reason to act. From the passenger side came a younger officer, Riley Hayes. He seemed barely out of the academy, his uniform still crisp and a little too loose, his eyes flicking nervously toward the houses across the street. "Morning," Etta called out, her voice raspy but polite. She believed in manners even when others did not. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Keller did not answer immediately. He walked halfway up the driveway, chewing his gum with an open mouth. He stopped near the azaleas and looked her up and down with a gaze that felt like a shove. "You live here?" Keller asked, the accusation barely hidden in the question. Etta stiffened. "I've lived here for many years, officer. My name is on the deed and the mailbox." Keller smirked, a quick, humorless twitch of his lips. "We've had reports." "Reports?" Etta frowned, turning off the nozzle of the hose. "Reports of what?" "Excessive gardening, loitering," Keller said, taking another step forward. "Suspicious activity, potential casing of the property." Etta let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Casing the property, officer? I'm watering my own flowers. I have the key to the front door right here in my pocket." "So you say," Keller replied, his voice dropping lower, harder. "But we've had a string of break-ins in this new development area, and you fit the description of a suspect seen looking into windows yesterday." "A suspect?" Etta's heart began to hammer a warning rhythm against her ribs. "A 74-year-old woman with a cane and a bad hip is hopping fences and peeking in windows. You cannot be serious." "Let's see some ID," Keller demanded, extending a hand. "I don't carry my purse when I'm watering the hydrangeas," Etta said, her dignity hardening into steel. "It's inside. If you want to wait, I can go get it. Or better yet, you can ask Mrs. Ellison next door. She's known me for many years. I'm not asking the neighbors, and I'm not letting you go inside to retrieve a weapon," Keller snapped. He unhooked the thumb brake on his holster, not drawing the gun, but resting his hand on it. The threat was unmistakable. "Officer Keller," the younger cop, Hayes, spoke up from behind, his voice wavering. "She looks like she lives here, man. Look at the pictures on the porch. That's her in the photos." Keller whipped his head around. "Shut it, Hayes. I'm training you on situational awareness. Suspects lie. They use props. Secure the perimeter." Keller turned back to Etta. The air between them crackled with tension. Etta Whitaker had raised 3 boys. She had buried her husband. She had worked for many years as a registered nurse in the trauma ward, surrounded by chaos. She did not fear blood, and she did not fear bullies. "Get off my property," Etta said. Her voice was quiet, trembling not with fear, but with the effort of holding her anger in check. "You have no warrant. You have no cause. You are harassing an old woman." Keller's face flushed a mottled red. He was not used to resistance from someone who looked like Etta. He stepped into her personal space, the smell of stale coffee and aggression radiating from him. "You are failing to identify," Keller barked, "and you are resisting a lawful order. Turn around, hands behind your back." "For what?" Etta cried out, stepping back, her heel catching on the garden hose. "For watering my flowers." "For disorderly conduct and failure to comply," Keller shouted. He lunged. The contact was shocking in its violence. Keller did not simply grab her. He seized her, his large calloused hand wrapped around Etta's upper arm, squeezing tight enough to bruise the thin, papery skin instantly. "Hey!" Etta screamed, the sound tearing from her throat raw and terrified. "Let me go! You're hurting me! Stop!" "Stop resisting!" Keller roared, spinning her around with a force that would have been excessive even for a much younger, stronger person. Etta's cane clattered to the concrete driveway, the sound echoing sharply. Without its support, her bad hip buckled. She began to fall, but Keller yanked her upward by the arm, wrenching her shoulder with a sickening pop. "Please," Etta gasped, tears springing to her eyes from the sharp, white-hot pain shooting down her arm. "My arm, it's dislocated." "Get on the ground." Keller ignored her plea, sweeping her legs out from under her. Etta hit the concrete hard. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. Her cheeks scraped against the rough gravel, grit embedding into her skin. The world spun in a dizzy blur of blue sky, green leaves, grey concrete, and black boots. "Keller, stop!" Hayes shouted, rushing forward. "She's an old lady, for God's sake." "Back off, Hayes," Keller yelled over his shoulder, pressing his knee into the small of Etta's back. The weight was crushing. Etta wheezed, struggling to draw breath into her compressed lungs. "You saw it." "I didn't see anything," Hayes argued, panic rising in his voice. But he did not physically intervene. He stood there, paralyzed by the hierarchy of the badge, watching a crime unfold before his eyes. Keller grabbed Etta's wrists. She had arthritis in both hands, her fingers permanently slightly curled. He forced them together behind her back, twisting them at an unnatural angle. "You're breaking them," Etta whimpered, her face pressed into the dirt. "Oh God, you're breaking them." Click, click. The handcuffs bit into her wrists, too tight. Keller yanked her up by the chain of the cuffs, forcing her to her knees. Etta cried out, a sound of pure agony that pierced the quiet morning. That scream woke up the street. Doors flew open. Mrs. Ellison, the elderly neighbour, came out in her bathrobe. A young couple from the new modern house across the street ran out, phones already raised and recording. "What are you doing to her?" Mrs. Ellison shrieked, shuffling as fast as she could toward the driveway. "That's Etta. She's the head of the church choir. Get off her." "Back up! Police business," Keller shouted, pointing a finger at the gathering crowd. He was sweating now, the adrenaline of the assault mixing with the realization that he had an audience. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. It was the bully's instinct. "She attacked an officer," Keller lied, his voice loud enough for the cameras. "She is under arrest." Etta knelt on her own driveway, dust on her Sunday dress, blood trickling from a scrape on her cheek. She felt humiliated. She felt small. But beneath the pain, the old steel of her spirit began to cool and harden. She looked up at Hayes, the rookie. He was pale, shaking. "Son," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Check my pocket." "What?" Hayes blinked, startled. "My apron pocket," she rasped. "My phone. I have a right to make a call." "You can make a call at the station," Keller sneered, dragging her toward the cruiser. "No." Etta planted her knees, refusing to move. The neighbors were shouting louder now. "I know my rights. You are detaining me on private property without a warrant. I have a right to notify my family before you take me anywhere, unless you want a kidnapping charge added to your lawsuit." It was a bluff, legally speaking, but the word lawsuit and the growing crowd of recording phones made Keller pause. He knew the optics were bad. If he let her make a call, maybe it would de-escalate the mob forming on the sidewalk. He assumed she would call a crying daughter or a local public defender. "Fine," Keller spat. He reached into her apron, pulled out an old, cracked smartphone, and unlocked it. She did not use a passcode. He held it to her ear, mocking her. "Make it quick, Grandma. Tell him to bring bail money." Etta did not scroll through her contacts. She did not need to look up the number. It was on speed dial number 1. She leaned her head toward the phone Keller held. Her eyes closed as the line rang. 1 ring. 2 rings. "Mom." The voice on the other end was clear, alert, and instantly worried. It was not a sleepy morning voice. It was a voice that was always ready. "Knox," Etta said, her voice breaking for the first time. "Knox, baby." "Mom, what's wrong? Why do you sound like that?" The shift in tone was instantaneous, from son to soldier. I'm at home, Knox. There's a policeman, Officer Keller, badge number 492, and Hayes. What did they do? The voice on the phone went cold, ice cold. What did they do? He hurt me, baby. He threw me down. My arm. I think my arm is bad. They have me in cuffs in the driveway. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not an empty silence. It was a terrifying, loaded silence. The sound of a predator calculating the distance to its prey. Are you safe right now? Are they still touching you? He's holding the phone. He's standing over me. Okay, Knox said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Mom, listen to me. Do not say another word. Do not resist. I am on my way. I was at the gym on 4th. I'm coming. Knox, don't do anything crazy, she whispered. I won't, Knox promised. I'm going to do everything exactly by the book. Put him on. What? Put the officer on the phone. Etta looked at Keller. He wants to talk to you. Keller laughed. A cruel barking sound. He pulled the phone back to his own ear. Yeah, who is this? The grandson. Listen here, pal. Your grandma's going to jail for assaulting an officer. This is Major Knox Whitaker, United States Army Delta Force. I'm currently on terminal leave, but I retain full active status. You are currently violating the civil rights of a dependent of a Tier 1 operator. If you move her 1 inch from that driveway before I arrive, I will consider it an act of kidnapping, and I will use necessary force to interdict. Do you understand me? Keller blinked. He looked at the phone, then down at the old woman. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, sure. And I'm the King of England. Tell it to the judge, G.I. Joe. Keller hung up the phone. He tossed it onto the grass. Load her up, he ordered Hayes. But he said, Hayes stammered. He's a liar, Keller said, grabbing Etta by the arm again. Just some punk trying to scare us. Let's go. But as they dragged Etta toward the back seat, a low rumble began to vibrate the air. It was not a police cruiser. It was the roar of a high-performance engine pushing redline, getting closer, fast. Keller paused, hand on the car door. He looked down the street. A matte black Ford F-15 Raptor, lifted and modified, turned the corner at the end of the block. It did not slow down. It roared down the residential street with the terrifying velocity of a missile. What the? Keller muttered. The truck screeched to a halt right behind the cruiser, blocking it in completely. The driver's door flew open before the truck had even fully settled on its suspension. A boot hit the pavement. Major Knox Whitaker stood up. He was 6'4", wearing gym shorts and a tight army green t-shirt that strained against muscles built for war, not for show. He did not have a gun in his hand. He did not need one. The way he walked toward them, balanced, centered, eyes locked on Keller, was more threatening than any weapon. Keller put his hand on his holster. Stay back, police. Knox did not stop. He did not run. He walked with a steady, predatory rhythm. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, showing he was unarmed, but his voice projected with the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers in battle. I see you have your hand on your weapon, Officer Keller, Knox said, his voice carrying clearly to the neighbours and the cameras. I am unarmed. I am approaching my injured mother. If you draw that weapon, you will regret it for the rest of your very short career. The war was about to begin. Keller's hand hovered over his Glock. His knuckles were white. In any other situation, against any other civilian, he would have drawn the weapon by now. But something about the man standing 5 feet away, stopped him. It was not just the size of Knox Whitaker, it was the stillness. Most people scream when they are angry. They flail. They posture. Knox did none of that. He stood with his feet shoulder-width apart. His hands were open and visible at chest height. His breathing was rhythmic and controlled. His dark eyes, unblinking, dissected Keller like a surgeon studying a patient. "Step back, sir," Keller yelled, his voice cracking slightly. "This is a crime scene." "This is my mother's driveway," Knox corrected, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the humid air. "And you have assaulted a 74-year-old woman. I am checking her vitals. If you shoot me, make sure you kill me, officer, because if I survive, you will not like what happens next." Knox knelt. He turned his back on the armed officer, the ultimate display of dismissal and trust in his own presence. "Mom," Knox whispered, his demeanor shifting instantly from warrior to son. He touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "Look at me. Breathe." Etta was sobbing quietly now, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the throbbing ache in her shoulder and wrists. "My arm, Knox. It hurts so bad." Knox's eyes tracked down to her shoulder. It was slumped forward, the joint clearly dislocated. He saw the bruises blooming on her tricep, like dark ink spreading in water. He saw the tight metal cuffs digging into her arthritic wrists. A vein in Knox's temple pulsed once. It was the only sign of the volcanic rage boiling inside him. He had spent over a decade hunting threats in faraway mountains and deserts. He had kicked down doors to save strangers. And here, in his own hometown, a man with a badge had done this to the woman who had taught him to pray. Knox stood up slowly. He turned to face Keller. "Unlock the cuffs," he said. It was not a request. "She's under arrest," Keller spat. "Assaulting an officer. Resisting arrest." "My mother has walked with a cane for years," Knox said, pointing to the hickory stick lying in the grass. "You are telling me she assaulted you? A grown man in body armor?" "She lunged," Keller lied. The lie tasted sour in the air. Knox looked at Hayes. The rookie was standing by the trunk of the cruiser, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Officer Hayes, is it?" Knox asked. He did not shout. He spoke to Hayes like a disappointed mentor. "I know your father, Bob Hayes, runs the hardware store on Main. Good man. Does he know his son stands by and watches elderly women get hurt?" I didn't," Hayes stammered, sweat pouring down his pale face. "You are witnessing a felony," Knox said, his voice hard. "Deprivation of rights under colour of law. If you do not take those cuffs off her right now and call paramedics, you are an accessory. You will go to federal prison alongside him." "Don't listen to him, Hayes," Keller roared. "Call it in. Officer in distress. Get back up." Hayes looked at Keller, then at Etta weeping in the dirt. He looked at Knox, who stood like a statue of judgment. The young officer broke. Hayes stepped forward, fishing for his keys. "Brody, I'm taking them off. Her arm is messed up, man. We can't leave her like this. You touch those cuffs, and I write you up for insubordination," Keller threatened. "Write me up then," Hayes muttered. He knelt beside Etta. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry." As the cuffs clicked open, Etta groaned. Her arms fell limp. Knox was there instantly, supporting her weight. "Don't move the shoulder, Mom," Knox said gently. "We're going to get you to the hospital, but not yet. We need everything documented here first." Keller had retreated to his radio. He was shouting codes, calling for immediate assistance, claiming a hostile crowd and an aggressive suspect. He was trying to control the narrative. He was trying to bury the truth under a wave of blue lights. Knox pulled his own phone from his pocket. He did not call 911. He did not call the police station. He dialed a number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Robinson," a voice answered on the first ring. It was sharp, clipped. "Colonel," Knox said, his eyes never leaving Keller. "I need the protocol initiated. Code Black, domestic soil. I have a hostile entity violating the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act and engaging in police brutality against the immediate family of a Tier 1 asset." "Location?" the colonel asked. No questions about whether he was sure. The colonel knew Knox Whitaker did not bluff. "Oak Creek, North Carolina. Officer Brody Keller. I need JAG. I need the FBI Civil Rights Division. And I need you to call the governor." "Sit tight, Major. The cavalry is rolling. Do not engage unless lethal force is used against you." "Understood," Knox said. "But Colonel, if he touches her again, I can't promise I won't turn him into a past tense verb." "Understood. ETA on local assets is minutes." Knox hung up. He looked at Keller, who was now pacing by his car, waiting for his backup. Keller smirked, thinking the local boys were coming to save him. "You think a phone call scares me?" Keller sneered. "I own this town, boy. My brother is the chief of police. You just dug your own grave." Knox smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. "Officer Keller," he said softly, "you're playing checkers. I'm playing chess. And I just took your queen." The sirens began as a wail in the distance, quickly growing into a deafening cacophony. Within minutes, Elm Street was flooded with flashing lights. 3 more police cruisers skidded to a halt. 6 officers spilled out, hands on their holsters, adrenaline high. They saw Keller waving them over. They saw the suspect, Knox, standing over the victim, at least in Keller's own mind. "Get on the ground now," a sergeant shouted, leveling a taser at Knox's chest. The neighbors screamed. Mrs. Ellison was now crying hysterically on her lawn. The crowd had grown to 20 people, all filming. Knox did not get on the ground. He raised his hands slowly again. "I am an active duty serviceman. I am unarmed. My mother requires medical attention." "I said get down," the sergeant yelled, stepping closer. "Cuff him," Keller shouted, emboldened by his reinforcements. "He threatened to kill me. He obstructed justice." 2 officers rushed Knox. He did not fight them. He let them grab his massive arms. He let them spin him around. He felt the cold steel of handcuffs for the second time that day, this time on his own wrists. But as they shoved him against the hood of the car, he did not struggle. He just watched the end of the street. "You're done," Keller whispered in Knox's ear as they patted him down. "Assault on an officer. Terroristic threats. I'm going to make sure you rot in a cell, hero," Knox said calmly, his cheek pressed against the hot metal of the cruiser. "That's the moment your life ended." As if on cue, the sound of the local sirens was cut through by a different sound, a deep thumping rhythm that shook the windows of the houses. Whoop, 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 whoop. A black helicopter, bearing no markings other than a tail number, banked low over the neighborhood. The wind from its rotors whipped the trees, sending leaves swirling. It hovered ominously low over the street. Then came the cars. These were not police cruisers. They were black Chevrolet Suburbans with tinted windows and government plates. 4 of them tore around the corner, ignoring the police barricade, mounting the curb to get around the parked cruisers. They screeched to a halt in a flank formation. Doors flew open. Men in dark suits with earpieces poured out. They moved differently than the cops. They moved with the fluid, lethal efficiency of federal agents. On the back of their jackets, in bold yellow letters, FBI. Behind them, from the lead SUV, stepped a man in a pristine grey suit. He was older, with silver hair and a face carved from granite. He carried a leather briefcase. This was Richard Hale, one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the state, a man who had taken on police departments before. And behind him, stepping out of a trailing vehicle, was a man in full army camouflage, bearing the rank of lieutenant colonel. The local cops froze. The sergeant lowered his taser. Keller's mouth fell open. The lieutenant colonel marched straight toward the police sergeant. "Who is in command here?" I am, sir. Sergeant Baker," the cop stammered. "You certainly do have a situation," the colonel barked. "You have a highly decorated Delta Force operator in handcuffs for checking on his mother. You have federal agents on scene investigating a civil rights violation. And you have about 10 seconds to unhand my soldier before I have the military police dismantle this station brick by brick." Sergeant Baker looked at Knox, then at Keller. The colour drained from his face. "Delta Force, uncuff him, now." The officers scrambled to unlock Knox. Knox rubbed his wrists, his expression unchanging. He walked past the stunned police officers and stood next to the colonel. "Report, Major," the colonel said. "Subject is Officer Brody Keller," Knox said, pointing a finger at the man who was now trembling near his patrol car. "Unprovoked assault on a geriatric civilian. Excessive force resulting in grievous bodily harm. False imprisonment. And I have reason to believe he falsified the initial probable cause." Richard Hale, the lawyer, stepped forward. He did not look at the cops. He looked at the cameras held by the neighbours. He was already playing to the court of public opinion. "Officer Keller," Hale boomed, his voice projecting like a stage actor's. "I represent the Whitaker family. I am serving you with a notice of immediate litigation. Furthermore, these FBI agents are seizing your body camera, your dash camera, and your patrol vehicle as evidence in a federal investigation." Keller looked around wildly. "You can't do this. I'm a police officer. I have immunity." "Qualified immunity covers mistakes, officer," Hale smiled, a predator smelling blood. "It does not cover malice, and it certainly does not cover what I'm going to find on that body cam." It malfunctioned," Keller stammered, falling back on his old excuse. "It wasn't recording." Knox stepped forward. He pointed up at the modern house across the street, the one Keller had claimed Etta was casing. "See that?" Knox asked. Keller looked up. A sleek black sphere hung under the eaves of the modern porch. "That is a 4K omnidirectional security camera," Knox said. "And the owner is standing right there on the lawn, streaming the footage to the cloud. We have everything. The approach, the lack of provocation, the throw, the twist, the screams." Knox leaned in close so only Keller could hear him. "I told you," Knox whispered. "Hard karma." An FBI agent stepped forward, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Officer Brody Keller, you are being detained for questioning regarding federal civil rights violations." The silence that followed was heavy. The local cops watched in shock as one of their own was turned around and cuffed by the feds. The click of the cuffs was the same sound Etta had heard, but this time It sounded like justice. But the nightmare was not over. As they led Keller away, Knox turned back to his mother. The paramedics had arrived, but Etta had refused to be moved until she saw her son was free. "Knox," she whispered, her face pale. She slumped. It was all too much. Knox caught her before she hit the ground. Her eyes rolled back. The shock and the pain had been too much for her heart. "Medic!" Knox screamed, a sound of pure terror that the guns and the cops had failed to elicit. "Get over here now." The twist was not just the arrest. The battle was won. But the war for Etta's life was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the ICU waiting room buzzed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing into Knox's skull. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The universal scent of bad news. Etta Mae Whitaker was stable, but fragile. The fall had not just dislocated her shoulder. The shock of the assault had triggered a stress-induced cardiomyopathy, broken heart syndrome. Her heart muscle, stressed beyond its limit by the adrenaline and fear, had stunned itself. She was currently sedated, a symphony of wires and tubes tethering her to this world. Knox stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot of St. Jude's Medical Center. He had not changed clothes. He was still in his gym shorts and tight t-shirt, now stained with the sweat of a day that felt endless. He looked like a caged tiger, his reflection in the glass dark and brooding. Behind him, Richard Hale, the high-powered attorney, was on a call. His voice was hushed but lethal. "I don't care what the police union rep says, Bob. If they release that statement, I will sue them for defamation before the ink is dry. She is a retired nurse and a church deacon, not a known agitator." Hale hung up and walked over to Knox. "They're trying to spin it, Major. The department just released a preliminary press briefing. They aren't admitting fault. They're claiming Officer Keller was responding to a mental health crisis and that your mother was disoriented and combative due to dementia." Knox did not turn around. His fist clenched against the windowsill until the glass rattled. "She does not have dementia. She does the Sunday crossword in pen." "I know," Hale said softly. "But they need a narrative that justifies the force. They're banking on the fact that she's old. They think the public will buy the confused, dangerous, elderly woman's story." "They picked the wrong narrative," Knox said, turning around. His eyes were dry, but they burned with a cold, terrifying fire. "And they picked the wrong family." At that moment, Knox's phone buzzed. It was the Colonel. "Turn on the TV, Channel 8. Knox grabbed the remote and flicked on the wall-mounted television. The screen showed the anchor woman looking grave. The headline at the bottom read, "Exclusive video surfaces of Oak Creek arrest. We warn our viewers, the following images are disturbing." It was the footage from the neighbor's 4K security camera. The angle was perfect. It showed the peaceful morning. It showed Etta watering her hydrangeas. It showed Keller's aggressive approach. The audio was crisp. For what? For watering my flowers. Then the crunch of the tackle, the scream, the sickening pop of the shoulder. The waiting room went dead silent. A nurse passing by stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Then the video cut to the aftermath. Knox's arrival, the truck blocking the cruiser, the way he stood there calm, hands up, while Keller shouted lies. The anchor woman returned, looking visibly shaken. This video, provided to us by a neighbor who wishes to remain anonymous, directly contradicts the statement released by the police department minutes ago. We have reached out to Chief Keller for comment, but have received no response. Knox watched the screen. The video had been uploaded to social media simultaneously. The view count was ticking up in real time. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The narrative was not just broken, it was obliterated. That's the kinetic strike of the information age, Hale murmured, a small grim smile playing on his lips. Public opinion just shifted from wait and see to burn it down. But Knox was not smiling. He was looking at the comments rolling in on the live feed. People were angry. But Knox noticed something else. A comment from a user named Oak Creek Resident caught his eye. Keller did this to Mr. Thornton last month too. Accused him of loitering on his own porch. Thornton moved away the next week. Sold his house cheap. Another comment. Same with Mrs. Higgins on Elm. Harassed her until she sold. Who is buying these houses? Knox zoomed in on the screen. The pattern. It was not just racism. It was not just a bad apple cop having a bad day. Hale, Knox said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. This was not an arrest. It was an eviction. What do you mean? Keller is not just a bully, Knox said. His mind shifted into tactical analysis mode. He was connecting the dots. The loitering accusations, the specific targeting of elderly homeowners in a gentrifying neighborhood, the aggressive push to criminalize their existence. He's a cleaner. He's clearing the board. Knox looked at the colonel, who had just walked into the waiting room. Colonel, I need intel to run a financial background check on Officer Brody Keller and his brother the Chief, and I need to know who has bought the last 5 properties on Elm Street. The colonel nodded. I'll have the analysts on it. You think this is organised? I think my mother did not get beaten up because she was old, Knox said, his jaw tightening. She got beaten up because her house sits on a double lot and someone wants to build condos there. The investigation room at the FBI field office was quiet, save for the hum of computer servers. Knox was not supposed to be there. Civilian access was strictly prohibited. But when you are a Tier 1 operator and the victim is your mother, rules become guidelines. Agent Delgado, the lead FBI investigator, threw a file onto the metal table. It slid across to Knox. You were right, Delgado said, looking tired. It's a shell game. Knox opened the file. It was a complex web of LLCs. The last 6 houses in Oak Creek were purchased by Oak View Development LLC, Delgado explained. They bought them for well under market value. The sellers were all elderly residents who had extensive police records that only started a few weeks before they sold. Harassment campaigns, Knox said, reading the file. Keller hits them with fines, citations, loitering charges, noise complaints. He makes their lives a living hell until they just want to leave. Exactly. Delgado nodded. And here's the kicker. Oakview Development LLC is registered in Delaware, but the operating papers trace back to a holding company owned by a man named Victor Lang. Lang, Knox tested the name. Who is he? Local real estate mogul, big donor to the Police Benevolent Association, Delgado said. And guess who sits on the board of his charitable foundation? Knox flipped the page. A photo stared back at him. A man in a police dress uniform shaking hands with a slick-looking developer. Chief of Police Harlan Keller, Brody Keller's older brother. The chief sends his brother to terrorize the homeowners, Knox summarized, his voice flat. The brother creates a criminal record for them, devaluing the property and pressuring them to sell. The developer buys it cheap. The chief gets a kickback, disguised as a donation or a consulting fee. It's a textbook RICO case, Hale said from the corner of the room. Racketeering, extortion, wire fraud. This destroys the entire department. We have enough for an indictment on Brody Keller, Delgado said. But the chief, he's insulated. We need a smoking gun to link him directly to the orders. Without that, he claims his brother went rogue and washes his hands of it. Knox stood up. He walked to the whiteboard where the timeline of events was drawn. He stared at the date of his mother's attack. Brody Keller is a bully, Knox said, and bullies are cowards. He will not do time for his brother. If we squeeze him, he flips. He's in a holding cell, Delgado said, lawyered up. He's not talking. He's not talking to you, Knox corrected, because he thinks his brother can save him. He thinks the blue wall of silence will hold. We need to show him that the wall has already crumbled. Knox turned to the colonel. I need a psychological operation. I need Keller to believe his brother has already betrayed him. The colonel smiled. It was a cold military smile. We can arrange a little misinformation. 2 hours later, in the county jail, Brody Keller sat in the interrogation room. He looked smaller without his uniform. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the jittery fear of a man who knows he is in deep water. But he was still holding on to hope. Harlan will fix this, he told himself. Harlan runs this town. The door opened. Agent Delgado walked in. He did not sit down. He just tossed a piece of paper on the table. It was a transcript. Fake, of course. But Keller did not know that. What's this? Keller asked, his voice raspy. That, Delgado said, is a statement your brother, Chief Harlan Keller, just gave to the press. He's calling you a disgrace. He says he had no knowledge of your activities. He's announcing an internal review to root out the cancer in the department. You're the cancer, Brody. Keller read the paper. His hands began to shake. Officer Keller's actions were the result of his own instability. I have long suspected he was unfit for duty. He's throwing you to the wolves, Brody, Delgado said, leaning in. He's going to let you take the fall for the assault, the civil rights violations, the fraud. You're looking at 20 years, easy, federal time. You know what they do to cops in federal prison. Keller looked up. His eyes were wet. The betrayal broke him faster than any physical threat could have. He told me to do it, Keller whispered. Delgado did not react. He just tapped the table. I can't hear you. He told me to do it, Keller screamed, slamming his fist on the table. Harlan. He gave me the list of addresses. He said, shake them up. Make them want to leave. He said Lang would cut us in for 10% of the flip. Delgado smiled. You want to tell that to the recorder, Brody? You want a deal? I want that son of a gun in the cell next to me, Keller hissed. That night, the quiet suburb of Oak Creek saw another convoy of vehicles. But this time, they were not headed for Etta May's small bungalow. They were headed for the sprawling, gated mansion of Chief Harlan Keller. Knox sat in the passenger seat of the lead FBI SUV. He wore a heavy Kevlar vest over his civilian clothes. He was not armed. He did not need to be. But the colonel had insisted he be there to see it. It was part of the healing process. Breach! The radio crackled. The front gate of the mansion was rammed by an armoured vehicle. Flashbangs detonated in the front yard to disorient the security dogs. Federal agents. Search warrant. Knox watched As the team kicked in the heavy oak doors, he saw the lights flip on inside. He saw Chief Keller, wearing silk pajamas, being dragged out onto his manicured lawn in handcuffs. The chief looked up. He saw the FBI agents. He saw the media vans parked down the street. And then he saw Knox. Knox stepped out of the SUV. He walked to the edge of the police tape. He looked down at the man who had orchestrated the terrorizing of his mother. The chief glared at him. "You think you won? You're nobody." Knox looked at the chief, then at the moon hanging over the peaceful, sleeping houses of his childhood neighborhood. "I'm Etta May's son," Knox said simply. "And that's enough." As they shoved the chief into the van, Knox's phone rang. It was the hospital. Major Whitaker. It was the doctor. Knox's heart stopped. The victory, the raid, the justice. It all meant nothing if... "She's awake," the doctor said. "She's asking for you. And she's asking if you remembered to turn off the garden hose." Knox let out a breath he felt he had been holding for hours. He looked at the colonel. "Let's go. I have to go water the hydrangeas." The recovery was slow, measured not in hours, but in the gradual return of colour to Etta May's cheeks. For weeks, Knox did not leave her side. He slept in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to her hospital bed. His massive frame folded into a shape that defied physics, guarding her rest just as he had guarded high-value assets in war zones. But this asset was priceless. When the day finally came for her discharge, the hospital lobby was not empty. As Knox wheeled Etta out the automatic doors, the bright North Carolina sun made her blink. But it was not just the sun. Lined up along the sidewalk, stretching down the block, were people. There was Mrs. Ellison holding a Tupperware container of her famous peach cobbler. There was Mr. Thornton, who had flown back from Florida just for this. There were the young couples from the new modern houses holding signs that read, "We stand with Etta." There were veterans from the local VFW standing at attention, saluting as Knox pushed the wheelchair, and parked right at the curb was the colonel leaning against the black SUV. He was not wearing his uniform today. He was in a suit, but he still looked like iron. "Your chariot, madam," the colonel said, opening the door. Etta looked at the crowd, her eyes filling with tears. She reached up and touched Knox's hand on her shoulder. "Look at all these people, Knox," she whispered. "I didn't know I had so many friends." "You don't have friends, Mom," Knox smiled, lifting her gently into the car. "You have a battalion." Months later, the federal courthouse was packed. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat of the crowd. This was the sentencing hearing for United States versus Harlan Keller, Brody Keller, and Victor Lang. The trial had been a spectacle. The evidence Knox and the FBI had uncovered was overwhelming. The Oakview development scheme was exposed as a multi-million-dollar racketeering operation. They found the emails where Chief Keller mocked the elderly residents. They found the ledger where Lang recorded the bribes. But the most damning piece of evidence remained that morning video. It was played on a loop for the jury. The image of Brody Keller twisting the arm of a weeping grandmother had seared itself into the conscience of the jury. When the judge asked if the victim wanted to make a statement, the courtroom went silent. Knox stood up to help Etta, but she waved him off. She gripped her cane, a new one, polished ebony with a silver handle, and stood up. She walked to the podium slowly, but she did not limp. Her shoulder had healed, but the stiffness remained a permanent reminder. She looked at Brody Keller. He was pale, gaunt, stripped of his uniform and his arrogance. He could not meet her eyes. "Mr. Keller," Etta said, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. "You broke my arm. You bruised my ribs. You humiliated me in front of my neighbours." She paused. "But you also did something else. You woke up a sleeping giant. You thought because I was old, I was weak. You thought because I was alone, I was voiceless. You forgot that even the oldest tree has roots that go deep, and if you try to pull it up, you might just bring the whole mountain down on top of you." She looked at the chief, then at Lang. "You three men treated my neighbourhood like a game of Monopoly. You treated people like pieces on a board. But God does not like ugly, and he certainly does not like thieves who wear badges." She turned to the judge. "Your Honour, I do not want revenge. Revenge is for the Lord. I want justice. I want to know that when I water my hydrangeas next Sunday, no one is going to come onto my property and treat me like a criminal. I want to know that the badge means protection, not predation." Etta sat down. The silence lingered for a long time. The judge adjusted his glasses. He looked at the defendants with a gaze that promised no mercy. "In my 20 years on the bench," the judge said, "I have rarely seen such a calculated abuse of power. You did not just break the law, you broke the public trust." The gavel came down like a hammer strike. Brody Keller, 15 years in federal prison for deprivation of rights under colour of law and assault. Harlan Keller, 25 years for RICO violations, conspiracy and wire fraud. Victor Lang, 10 years, plus a restitution fine of $15 million to be paid to the victims of his real estate scheme. As the bailiffs led them away in shackles, Brody Keller looked back one last time. He saw Knox standing tall next to his mother. Knox did not smile. He did not gloat. He just gave a single slow nod. Checkmate. A year later, on a Sunday morning, the air was crisp, hinting at autumn. The leaves on the great oak tree were turning a burnt orange. Etta Mae Whitaker stepped off her porch. The cane was in her left hand. Her right hand held the garden hose. The street was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was not the silence of fear or emptiness. It was the peaceful silence of a neighbourhood at rest. The for sale signs that had plagued the street were gone. The new families waved as they drove by. Mr. Thornton had moved back into his house 3 doors down, using the settlement money from the lawsuit to fix up his roof. A matte black truck pulled into the driveway. Knox hopped out wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He carried a bag of groceries. "Morning, Mom," he called out. "Morning, Knox." She smiled, spraying a fine mist over her hydrangeas, which were blooming bigger and bluer than ever before. Knox walked up the driveway. He stopped at the spot where the concrete was still slightly discoloured from where Etta's blood had fallen. He stared at it for a moment. The memory flashed. The cuffs, the scream, the rage. "You okay?" Etta asked, noticing his pause. Knox looked up at her. The rage was gone. The soldier was at rest. "Yeah, Mom," he said, walking over and kissing her on the cheek. "I'm good. Just admiring the flowers." "They need water," Etta said, turning the nozzle. "They need strong roots to survive the heat." "They have strong roots," Knox said, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "The strongest I know." From down the street, a police cruiser turned the corner. It was a new officer, a young woman. She slowed down as she passed the house. She rolled down the window, smiled, and gave a respectful wave. Etta waved back. "See," Etta said, turning back to her son. "Not all of them are bad, Knox. We just had to weed out the garden." Knox laughed, a deep, genuine sound that echoed in the morning air. "Yes, Mom, the garden looks perfect now." The water from the hose caught the sunlight, creating a small, fleeting rainbow over the driveway. It was a bridge of light over the place where the darkness had tried to win and failed. That day in Oak Creek proved that true strength is not found in a badge, a gun, or a bank account. It is found in the love of a son for his mother and the courage of a woman who refused to stay down. Officer Keller thought he was fighting an old lady. He did not realize he was fighting an entire army. Justice might be blind, but sometimes it has Delta Force on its side. If you believe that karma always comes for those who abuse their power, and you stand with mothers like Etta everywhere, hit that like button. Share this story to remind everyone that no one is above the law. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served.